Audiogyan is proud to partner with Unbox Cultural Futures Society and What Design Can Do. What Design Can Do is an international organization that seeks to accelerate the transition to a sustainable, fair, and just society using the power of design. What Design Can Do is launching Make It Circular Challenge, a global design competition building a circular future in partnership with IKEA. This challenge invites designers and creative entrepreneurs from everywhere to submit design driven climate innovations. The end goal? To show the world that circular future is not only imaginable but actionable. Winning projects will be propelled into 2023 with a €10,000 in funding and a tailor made development program. Submit your proposals online for free by 31st Jan 2023. Check out the design briefs and learn more about it on makeitcircular.whatdesigncando.com. Link in the show notes. And now, today's episode. This is Audiogyan, and I am your host, Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world. One man is equivalent to all creation. One man is a world in miniature. Albert Pike. Even in Indian spirituality, these words are commonly used and understood that the macrocosm is a reflection of our body, which is the microcosm. Why am I talking all about this? Well, today I have a guest who deals with really intricate artwork, which needs a lot of focus, attention, and precision. We are talking about miniature art. Today I have Srijan Jha with us on Audiogyan. Srijan is a miniature artist, traveler, writer, storyteller, and also engages in heritage restoration. He's from Bhopal, and we'll be talking about miniature art, which I'm almost clueless apart from following few people and looking at his work. So, welcome, Srijan, to Audiogyan. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for giving your time.
Thank you, Kedar. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you, and I really appreciate your platform once or in touch and once I looked at the work that you're doing. So it's absolutely my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah, as I sort of said in the introduction, that uh, I'm very curious to know what this art form is. And apart from following and looking at some work, I've never got a chance to speak to someone who's been dabbling with this art form. And broadly, I've come up with like two parts to the conversation. First is about generally understanding you, what got you into miniature art, and what is this form all about. And the second is about the form itself, right? I mean, just going deep into what is it, what are the subjects, and yeah, what's the future like. So I'll start off with like your take again, not a very traditional question, but generally, what's your definition of patience? Because that's what I understood why one needs while doing this work, and what's your definition of art in general as well. We'll take it from there.
Okay. So over the course of time that I've been painting, like I've always painted ever since I was a child, and I always remember painting as something that comes as first nature to me. But when I started doing it professionally, and when it sort of became something that I knew I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing, uh, it is painting and the process of making art and coming from from nothing to becoming and taking form into what it becomes. Patience was one of the key ingredients in that because uh, once I got familiar with the scale, which I absolutely chanced upon because of circumstance that, I was landlocked at a place with a notebook which was a tiny size. And I did not need anything bigger than that. I was very happy with just that size. And I started painting in that scale. And once I acquainted myself with that scale of work, uh, it was sort of almost teleporting at that point that I stopped existing in my surroundings and to work at that scale, I needed to completely belong in it and my mind could not be anywhere else. And patience was something that um always accompanied that process while I would work in that scale, because once I'm in that zone where, me and that painting, and there's nothing around it, there's just that and the detail at which you're working, you start breathing a certain way, you start, just being really meditative when you're in that zone. Then patience sort of becomes a virtue in that, rather than, the painting doesn't remain a quest any longer in which you have to reach the end of it and you're calculating the number of more hours that it would take. Rather, you just completely dive into it, forget the rest of your surroundings, and after the painting is done, you realize that, oh shit, maybe I was really patient while doing this because it looks quite intricate. But while doing it, I wasn't looking at it in the scale as I look at it after it's done, as a viewer of what has come out of it. So yeah, patience is something that has definitely grown with time. When I know what it feels like to paint for 50 hours versus 100 hours versus 200 hours versus when I stop counting the hours anymore, because it I won't like there's not a quest that I want to paint for these many hours, and this painting has to be a product of 1,000 hours. So it is something that came very organically, patience, and the more patient I was with a piece of paper, the more satisfaction I would get while I'm doing the last dot in that painting. So it is something that has also organically grown with the process of doing it. And the more time I'm spending with it, it's making me a very, very patient person. Otherwise, also, like besides my canvas, also in the way I live, in the way I believe I should react to anything outside of me and my painting in the world.
Got it. And like I'm just like jumping the gun here, but I'm sure we'll cover that in the later part. Is that what happens typically? Is do you sort of feel overwhelmed because if the subject comes first or something like that you have in mind now, oh, then is it intimidating because you have to like now reproduce it and sort of put it on paper? But I mean, typically, like in painting, it you can keep going on, but here, if you make a mistake or if you do something, how does it work? Like, does it feel sort of overwhelming when you have a subject in mind?
No, it's sort of really exciting because the first thing when there's a blank piece of paper in front of me, as small as a gesture of uh, taking a pen and making a line and a curve or a face in, just a line fashion, it might take as little as a minute, but there's a right happening inside of me while I'm making that line, because I'm at my eccentric peak of the painting at the beginning of it when I'm doing the subject. Because once that is outlined, I know that there are hours and hours of work that will go into very dedicatedly and very religiously painting it and rendering it in the way that I know how to paint and render. So the beginning part of articulating the subject of the painting is probably, I would call it, the most exciting 15 seconds of the painting for me. After that, it becomes a product of dedication and like absolute forgetting and surrendering inside this piece of paper. But it's not intimidating at all. It's like the rush of it keeps me fueled and excited enough to endlessly work on it for the rest of my days until the painting finishes. And the other thing that you asked in this question was the fear of, sort of messing up somewhere or, doing something which is a mistake. But I feel when you know your medium really well, and when not just in terms of the knowledge that you have about the medium, but when you have spent a lot of time with that medium, experimenting, working, and what seemed like mistakes when you look at them in the past, you know very naturally how to uh, sort of
Course correct.
rectify that mistake, or to sort of cherish that mistake also. Like in my personal paintings, wherever a mistake like that, which is very human, which is very like, if I'm dipping the paint and I've taken a little more water in the brush than I needed to. And while I was reaching where I'm going to paint, it drops at some place. Now it's come to a point where I find it so exciting because while rectifying it, I don't rectify it with the motive of covering it up, but I sort of decorate it in a manner that the paint that it becomes a part of the painting. And when I look back
Hmm.
at it, I remember it as little by little, minuscule notches by notches. I'm refining my skill. So yeah, like I sometimes get excited to make mistakes so that the painting has another plan and another story of its own to tell, irrespective of how much I sort of plan it and organize it.
Hmm.
That becomes
Very beautiful.
part of it.
Correct. Very beautiful. In fact, these days I've started using these words zooming in and zooming out a lot. So actually, we jumped in with a zoomed in state of what does patience means to you. We'll zoom out a bit, and like if you can give us like a sort of a sense of what is miniature art. I believe it was first called limning or something. So if you can just give us sort of from your exposure, like a brief history, its origin, travel, any
To sort
thoughts?
of
Why was it?
while you say brief history, I'll try as much as possible. You can just gesture me as well, and I will just make it briefer than I can. So basically, liming was something which became very famously known and appreciated probably in the 14th to 16th century, I believe. And that was the time when there were monarchs and rulers like King Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth I. And in that period of time, miniaturists were making palm-sized paintings. Essentially, that was the scale of them, and these were realistic portraits of these rulers. And of course, like it also got furthermore diluted from the royalty to something that an aristocrat can also possess by commissioning artists to make these limnings of their own or portraits of families and stuff like that. But before that, much before that, in fact, like the earliest I would say that I know of miniature was during, like I think 3500 BC, and
Wow.
a lot of time after that as well. The earliest example would be in Indus Valley civilization, where they had
Hmm.
these seals with the Bronze Age and stuff like that. Excuse me. They had these seals which had embossed, sort of very primitive embossed sculptures almost on these circular, uh, sort of rotating wheels, and you would take wet clay and you would roll these on top of them, and they would get an impression of this, of
Wow.
what is on it. And the subjects were very, because this was a time before there were distinct rulers as we know of in history. The subjects were these cavemen traveling with some fresh animal that they have hunted. And but it was very interesting because the sense of primitive printing, the sense of inlay, the sense of embossing, the sense of print making in terms of when the wheel finishes a full rotation on the wet clay, the scene repeats itself. So it starts looking like a caravan of these men who are walking with animals with them when it's actually just that much, like the circumference of the circle, is very interesting to look at. And that's, I would say, the earliest examples of miniature as an art form.
Art form.
And was after that, there was a lot of seals, the really decorative seals that were also miniatures, and some of the finest examples, I might add, at that. And another form of, like, I'm trying to talk about everything which is miniature, which is not miniature painting, also because it was a lot of different mediums in which the miniature art form very much existed before the time we conventionally know of it as. And so there was also, like, the most excellent example of miniature was probably, I would say, in the 16th century when there was boxwood Gothic sculptures. So out of boxwood, there were tiny, tiny Gothic miniatures made with the life of, with the resurrection and the crucifixion of Jesus and the life of Mary and heaven and hell and angels. And that is the most meticulous example of miniature till today in terms of the craftsmanship that it would have required. You know, these were pieces of boxwood that were probably 3 to 4 inches in their height, and they would have an entire elaborate scene which depicts the life of Jesus, which are carved out and sort of made into 3D sculptures, and they're used as jewelry, as lockets, as rosary beads. So, in terms of the fineness of a man's skill, I think that's the most extravagant example that I can give of miniature, which is the Gothic boxwood miniatures.
Yeah.
And
Sorry to interrupt you,
besides
but yeah. So just like a quick question before we move is that this small, like working on a small piece, was it sort of the necessity, or because there were not many surfaces to do, or was it just as an experimentation?
that was just the scale of showing the magnificence of labor. Like the smaller it is, the more elaborate it is, the more skill it takes, and the finer example of that art it becomes. It becomes the quest for like doing something mind blowing with a small cube. And it was time also which was very flourishing in terms of appreciation that art was getting. So material constraints weren't a part of it at all. There were because there was also inlay work with gold that would happen in this. So there were no constraints in terms of there wasn't a bigger surface available. It was also happening parallelly with stone, with wood, with brass, with metal. But the excellence of how fine can fine be was the quest when it comes to when we talk about Gothic boxwood miniatures. And yeah, besides that, I would say an integral lineage of miniature art was the illuminated manuscripts that you can broadly, when you look at it in retrospect, with as to like in the whole world where all it was flourishing and what all were the subjects of it, you would see a lot of Islamic illuminated manuscripts. You will see a lot of Roman Catholic illuminated manuscripts, which were essentially sacred texts that were decorated with really ornate forms around it, which was nature. And there were birds, there were animals, there were no, sorry, there weren't animals. There were birds. There was flora and fauna, and really exquisitely done around sacred text to decorate it over the sort of centuries, and the sort of faith and the rule of the monarchs. It translated into different languages almost. Like Arabic manuscripts was probably from the 7th century. After that, there was Persian manuscripts, which is something that much later Mughal manuscripts took from a lot from like Persian manuscripts, and there was Ottoman, which is the Turkish manuscripts, which was probably in the 15th, 16th century, and that was Istanbul and the flourishing time of the Islamic manuscripts that they had. And from these manuscripts came a time between the 16th to 18th century when the Mughal rule started, and all these miniature manuscript makers were called to the Mughal courts to illustrate scenes of the king, of Akbar, of his courts, and at the same time, regionally, with influences of all the gharanas that there were already in India as to their geographical belongings. It further bifurcated into painting gods in this fashion of Mughal paintings that had been that had been transcended down from the Persian manuscript miniature painters, and then with uh, time growing, uh, and how many centuries these ornamented paintings that were being made around the manuscripts, it became the hero because it sort of refined itself over centuries and generations of miniature artists so much that it did not require uh, sacred text to it did not require something that needs to be a supporting or ornating element for sacred text, but it became an art form in its own. That's when the full blown miniature painting saga of the Mughal art and everything that we know of as to okay, so and that's when in the towards the 18th century we started having a lot of paintings of Krishna and Radha and the Ras Leela and Durga and Shiva and all the events of mythologies being starting to be depicted as Mughal miniature paintings. And yeah, that I would say is pretty much the scape that I know of miniature art altogether. The only thing that I think I have missed out is miniature also comes from the word, like one thing is the scale of miniature paintings, which by standards today is something that should ideally fit either into your palm or it should not be any bigger than 25 by 25 inches, because these are also scenes which are like an entire city that we're talking about, or an entire Ram Darbar with probably 1,000 characters. So 25 by 25 inches uh, for to show the scale of the illustration is still a tiny piece of canvas. So that's the maximum size that a miniature painting can be. And another rule of miniature art is that the subjects that you paint, be it a human being, be it a flower, be it an animal, it has to be at least one sixth the size of the natural subject.
Wow.
So,
Okay. So these framework or these guidelines which you're mentioning, these are again organically evolving. Are there sort of
that is something
bodies
that has been,
who?
see, in contemporary definitions, that has become a standard by organizations which have archived and documented and studied all about miniature art, and everything that they have known of miniature art seems to uh, be in this scale. So hence it has become a scale now. But it was not. It is a contemporary rule, I would say. It wasn't something that was a parameter back in the day, because these things were also presented in so many different medium that I don't believe it was possible to put a standard to that in the time that we know of as history now.
Correct, correct.
And
Yeah, one quick question on the side is that what I see from how miniature sort of art is shown, it has a close resemblance with Gond painting also, right? Are there are there instances where it was practiced in India before and somehow both merged, or did I mean, where do you see it in India? Is there a parallel universe happening in India?
For sure, I feel, Kedar, that when I think of a lot of regions in India, uh, Madhya Pradesh definitely, like you said, Goond, Bihar and that side for Madhubani, Orissa, like you can call it the hero with its Patichitras, because that is something that comes that traces back to probably 7th and 8th century, when miniature art was being practiced in India in the east by the Palas of of Bengal, which are the Buddhists, and in the west by the Jains, and they were painting on palm leaves,
Hmm.
and that was really that's a very like strong example of miniature paintings in India that you talk about. You must have seen them in so many places, these leaflets that sort of fold and become like a tiny thing. It's like bamboo leaves, and then you open it up, and then it has the entire life of a god or a certain folklore or a story that they've drawn and carved as well. So that's the earliest examples of miniature art in India, and a lot of other folk styles also, uh, which Gond would be one, and like I said, Madhubani paintings and the Mughal paintings from Rajasthan and down south in Orissa, they all fall under the parameters of tangibility of miniature art
Oh, okay.
because they have always been practiced in smaller scales unless they have been painted for murals. Like, unless they're drawn on walls, they were always practiced in scales which are smaller than the size which qualifies to be a miniature painting. So I think invariably a lot of traditional art forms and folk art forms from villages in the country fall into the category of miniature paintings.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. Okay, and you also spoke about folklore. So, just like a follow-up question on that is that can you give us like a peek into mythology or folklore associated with this art form? Because that is also one of your subject interest areas, I believe.
Right. Yeah. So, for example, like you were talking about macrocosm and microcosm, it instantly reminds me of one of the most striking visuals that I have seen, so fantastical and so whimsical, which is the Vishwavatar of Lord Krishna when he presents himself in front of Arjun while he is giving him the wisdom of Mahabharata. He presents himself as the Vishwavatar to him, and that form of him, when you look at it, it has many legs and many hands, and it shows the entire universe, all the realms in different parts of his body. There are literally like villages illustrated in his torso and galaxies in his lower part of the body and his groin. And it's very, very whimsical to look at. And yeah, that would be one of the tales that I think visually transcends into something very beautiful and something very avant-garde almost. You know, when you look at it, very whimsical to look at, very unlike what traditionally you see represented gods as. So that is something, the gyan that Krishna gave Arjun by showing him that he is actually the macrocosm, and that you must look at the Vishwavatar as Krishna being the macrocosm. It's one of the most fantastic visuals that I have seen. Another story which I painted uh, the goddess for was folklore that I heard from this place, this tiny village called Durgapur, which is in the northeast of India, in which we always know about the story of Kali and her tongue sticking out because she was gonna, destroy the entire universe, and Shiva had to break her pride and her rage by lying down in the middle of the battlefield, and she steps on him. She sticks her tongue out as to what have I done, and that becomes Kali. And from there, the story doesn't go any further than that, right? That is the iconography of it, and that's where the story ends. But in this village, there is Durgapur. It's named after that, and it says that after stepping on her husband and after realizing what a grave mistake she has done, Kali wants to become Parvati again, like the wife of. She wants to take that avatar again, but she's filled and bursting with such oceans of rage that to suddenly become that, even for the goddess, isn't possible. And that's when 28 of her most uh, uh, her followers, people who worship her, 28 of her most sort of devoted disciples come to her trembling with fear, and they tell her that what have you done here, like the kind of fear that you have put in our hearts by showing us what you've made of this world, because of your rage, we do not know how to get over it. So you have to get over it first and take another form in order to calm us down with like how hellish scenes you've shown to us is when she realizes how much devotion is around her, and she grows 28 hands with lotuses in all her hands and gives one to each of these disciples. And that is supposed that avatar that she takes for these 28 disciples is called Maya Tara, and she is known as the calmest form of the energy that Devi has taken, the feminine energy, the calmest form of Durga, and it has the most number of hands that any avatar of Durga has. And it is something that I had never heard before. I had seen Durga with 20 hands, I had seen Durga with 12 hands, and generally each sort of weapon that she has or each memento of knowledge that she has in her hand had a meaning to that particular avatar of hers. But this avatar had the most number of hands, and every hand had the same thing. And it was very striking for me to look at. And it's another, this folklore really moved me with how obscure it was, with how much it made sense in terms of, when you apply that knowledge in your personal life, and how maximalist looking this figure of Durga also was. So that is in fact the first time that I got into the love for folklore and taking that ahead as, like if you ask me about my passion or about where I'd like to be or why I do what I do or what drives me to do it every day, I think folklore and these obscure tales that I don't hear of enough, if I even make them live for a certain number of years in my paintings to like somebody who buys it, somebody who likes it, somebody who talks more about it because they've learned about that tiny little story from my painting. I think that that's my absolute pleasure and passion to choose my subjects. In fact, now.
Got it. This is so fascinating. I would love to hear all the stories, and I think paintings and these sort of art forms are just taking these things along from generations to generations, interpreted, reinterpreted. It's just fascinating. Yeah, and I started off with macrocosm and sort of microcosm. Uh, so changing gears a bit and wanted to understand purely the art form and the details of it. So it seems like miniature art, you try to fit in like the universe or whatever your imagination is in that small little canvas which you decide. Uh, so what's so special? I mean, is it the intricateness of creating that artwork? Is it what's the most challenging part of it when you as a creator wants to put in? Is it the story, the narrative, or purely, I mean, in design at least we have these different stages of growing as a designer, right? First you try to play with tools, then master the tools, and then get into problem solving, and then into strategy, and so on and so forth. In painting,
Right.
especially in the miniature context, how does it sort of flow in?
I feel in miniature, at any moment that you're in front of your painting, whatever scale completely makes you shut off everything else. And because it's humanly impossible for you to do the scale of detail that you're doing at that point of time with any speck of thought in your head, besides what is happening between your eye, your brain, your eyes, and the paper, uh, is all engulfing. And that scale, of course, like varies every time you are in front of your paper. Sometimes I'm talking about making uh, dots which are right next to each other with a tiny strand of hair that I've left in my brush after clipping off all the other like bristles of the brush because I was just wanting to get deeper and deeper into it. It's not for somebody else to see, it's for myself. Because when I do that, I don't expect people to be able to tell that यहाँ पे इसका जो dot है इसमें दो bristle कम है या तो तीन bristle कम है. You know, it's not done for the visual value of it, but for engaging me in a scale where I have to shut everything out completely. And that is the bliss of just existing, that I think the scale of miniature art gives any miniature artist across the varied kind of works that they might be doing.
Hmm. 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 Yeah. Okay. So that as a creator, that gives you satisfaction. But finally, an artwork, मतलब बोलते हैं ना कि भक्त हैं इसलिए भगवान है, right? So finally, an artist wants to sort of share and be recognized or at least being appreciated. So
Right.
is there anything that is transpiring in the work, not just with your work or your style, but generally as an artist, and obviously with your work as well, is that what I mean, yes, it's a kind of a tricky question because you don't make art for like communication. I mean, yes, there is, but it's not the intent. So what do people take away from it? Like what do people look at when they look at, right?
Right. So,
So maybe I can just tweak
mm,
it a little bit,
I'm,
which is saying that most of what the work that I've seen yours has been portraits, right? So
mm,
I mean recently at least. So is portrait particularly used for something, or is there a story for everything? Like yeah,
definitely, I think there has to be a story and a focal point to why you're making what you're making. And for my work personally, I like to switch. Like I like to be working on two, three paintings simultaneously at the same time. So if one of those paintings requires my absolute dedication and worship towards my skill and the finest version of it, there would be always a painting parallelly on my desk which uh, handles the bursts of uh, sort of creative eccentricity to balance out the discipline that this painting requires. So
hmm,
that's when the contemporariness of the art comes in personally for me. Is that if I'm painting something very intricate and very elaborate with no room for error or mistakes, it is not a possibility that I can take a luxury of in this painting while I'm, painting the finest leaves in a color that I have made. For example, I would take the brush away and I would just take it over the other piece of paper with a very free hand and just like wanting to release what is contained for
hmm,
so many hours making this painting. So there are always two three different topics which I think is a very healthy practice to also have for somebody who makes paintings and does work with his hands for like 12 14 hours a day, because you reach a sense of monotony very easy. I know patience can help that, and you can live monotonously while doing it as well and sort of test your limits. But it's very easy to regulate it also at the same time if a stroke and how free you feel while just making a stroke for 5 seconds, it totally refreshes you and you can get back to it right away. It
correct.
works more in a more well functioning manner for me.
It's almost like the pressure cooker valve which is being released.
Right,
It
exactly,
sounds like
exactly.
that.
That's a very apt example for it. And yeah, recently, like all the recent work that mostly you would have seen of mine is again my, I love a lot of literature, a lot of poetry, and a lot of uh, music that has been sung and the lyric of it, which are known as masterpieces of musical works. And like very recently, not very recently, probably like 2 years back, I started working with a writer friend of mine who writes these beautiful couplets which are about love and longing and just like a very romantic collection of 100 couplets that he has written, and I'm making 100 paintings for them. So
Wow.
essentially, they are portraits of lovers with each other. So maybe that is why that is mostly recently what shows off my work, because I'm in the process of completing that book right now. But I do enjoy uh, doing a lot of flora and fauna and really intricate what could look like Mughal gardens as well. And it is just not something that I've been able to get back to once I've started doing portraits, because it's something that is being very well received for me. So it keeps my hands full all the time.
Got it. Got it. So speaking about these different subjects, I mean, yes, you covered a wide spectrum when you gave like a brief landscape and the history of miniature. But are there typically any subjects, especially in India, apart from folklore and mythology and whatever religion?
I think religion makes probably the spine of most of what we
Hmm.
know miniature art, uh, with uh, the most strongest gharana of it being in Rajasthan, the miniature Mughal paintings of Rajasthan. And it is about portraits of Mughal women, or about gods and different stories around them. But like you said earlier as well, that you see references and similarities between gold art and miniature. Those are paintings that qualify as miniature art, but they are not made with the intent of being them.
Hmm. Hmm.
So the subject itself is much wider, but what is made with the intent of being miniature art pretty much has a lot of portraiture and a lot of painting gods and like divine figures as the crux of the subject of miniature art as we know it today.
Hmm. 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 And is there a threshold to, so when you're pushing the boundaries on really exploiting the medium, have there been instances in the history where the subject is irrelevant, but it could be any mundane subject, but purely the art form is sort of qualifying it to be an art? You know what I mean? Like just the
Mm.
subject is very mundane, or it's irrelevant also, but purely the craftsmanship is helps it qualify to be a art. I don't know if that's a valid question also.
So, I'm trying to think about it, and I think it becomes like I wouldn't say that flora and fauna can qualify as a mundane subject, because it takes a lot of mastery to do that. But like when I would say when I was talking about the Gothic boxwood time, for instance, uh, a lot of jewelry decorations which were purely ornamental and had no meaning or story to them. So if there's a piece
Hmm.
and it has a motif on it, which with no specific meaning, but it was just done with the purpose of decoration. I don't know of any abstract subjects as like maybe that was something that could have been an answer to your question, but that's not something that I'm aware of. But purely for decoration purposes, there has been miniature art that has flourished across mediums, which is
Oh,
just done with the intent of decorating a space
yeah,
to look visually elaborate.
correct. I mean, just pure aesthetics kind of a thing.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
correct.
cool. I have last two questions. One is, how mini can a miniature painting be? Like, not just for the fun of it. I mean, these days you have that intricate artwork where वो छोटे से राइस के दाने पे भी कुछ लिखा रहता है. I'm not talking about that, but generally, by and large, like, is it like a matchbox size where you're talking about like deep philosophy, or I don't know how what's the smallest that one can go?
See, like you mentioned, like if you wouldn't have said the rice frame, then I would have definitely. And but like what you see on it, like these are things that like sort of seem a little ridiculous to me. Uh, I, I, I might sound weird saying that, but like the quest of showing something which is humanly pretty much impossible in that scale, I don't understand that. So if you see a very like tiny little scenery that is painted with just like three strokes or something on a rice grain, just because you want to make it that small, uh, if you would rather paint that scenery on a matchbox, I would understand that more if you could detail it out more. It would, do more or move me more as an artwork. But like the person in India, uh, Ram Prasad Verma, I believe, who holds a world record for the smallest painting in the world, has drawn portraits of Bhagat Singh and Mother Teresa on a mustard seed, which is way
Wow.
tinier than a rice grain, and it cannot even be documented well because it's so tiny. So when if you look at it on Google or chance upon it, it looks like a tiny blurred image with pixels on it. But that is the finest that people have gone uh, and gotten world records for it. But from the culture and the lineage point of it, if I have to answer that question for you, then probably I would say in the 14th, 15th, 13th century during the Persian time of the illuminated manuscripts, the miniaturists, and also during the Ottoman periods in the 16th century, which would be the excellent manuscript paintings in miniature in the Istanbul region. The miniaturists used to paint with porcupine spikes because
Wow.
that was the finest. Uh, that you did not have to carve manually to make the finest, because the idea was that if a human being, if a mere mortal makes something the finest, it is not finer than what the immortal God has made. So
Mhm.
in nature, the porcupine spike was the finest, and the miniature artists for generations and generations used to paint with that. And in fact, like there's a book called My Name is Vet by Oran Pamuk, which is about the miniature artists and the time when from Persian miniature art, it was going towards the Mughal time in the 16th and the 17th century, and they were being all called to the courts of Akbar to paint for him. So the miniaturists of that time used to paint with this porcupine spike, and the masters, you over decades and decades of painting at that fine scale, which is the matchbox scale that you were talking about. They used to lose their eyesight, but their mastery was so good that even after becoming blind, they used to paint with absolute precision. So there were actually younger miniaturists who used to practice painting so much and almost lunatic like. And yeah, so the masters used to paint all their life and lose their eyesight and still paint perfect paintings, like their vision wasn't lost at all. And younger miniaturists used to strive for that, that they wanted to paint almost like lunatics until they lose their eyesight. And when they did not lose their eyesight, they used to poke their eyes with these porcupine spikes, which were their brushes, in order to lose eyesight so that they can become one with the masters in terms of their stature of how respected they are as miniaturists. So
Wow.
that was how, almost to the point of insanity, the scale of miniature art got to the masters who are uh, known as, like, the pillars of this magnificent thing called miniature art.
Amazing, amazing. I'm short of words. It's yeah. Uh yeah, while you were saying, I was also remembering that I had gone for one workshop where one of the person had said that they like especially during at the time of invasion and lot of silk and a lot of cotton was exchanged. There were like
Right.
there were like uh, saris which could fold in a small matchbox. So I think the quest to condense a lot in again going back to the microcosm has been quite a bigger
Right.
quest in the world at large. So one last question, Srijan, is that with digital age and obviously technology, um, like how are these sort of how do you see the future? Does it sort of, I mean, an iPad and other places you can now zoom in 20x and make something and then zoom out, get the
Right.
desired output. Uh, but the warmth and the actual stuff that is or put on paper, uh, you have to like a Xerox can't do like justice to it, or a copy of that image, uh, even if it's digitized, won't do that justice. So what's the future like for you? And since you are in that community of the artists doing same kind of work, what's the sentiment there? Just a flavor of for us.
So, in terms of achieving the visual uh, scale of detail, like you said, that you can zoom in 20x times and do that, it is possible. But when it is done by hand, and what the artist goes through when he is performing at that scale, that uh, sort of expression and that feeling cannot be replicated in that scale, right? Because technology will tomorrow also let you uh, work probably 40x instead of 20x. And then, uh, like that digital medium, I don't know when it will saturate itself because it will always be subject to technologically how much more fine you can go in it. But it's more articulate, I feel, when you're working on a human scale with your hands because there is only like I cannot go finer than one bristle of my brush. Like that's a fact for me humanly and for my eyesight and for the sturdiness of my hand possibly. And I think for me personally, I left digital media step by step by step, and I got more away from it because it couldn't give me the satisfaction and the joy of what getting your hands dirty and doing things with your hands uh, does. And in no manner, while saying this, am I taking away from how beautiful people's work on virtual media is right now. On Instagram, there are so many of these graphic collage artists who are making some aesthetically astoundingly beautiful work. I'm not taking away from that, but what working with hand does for me is probably the kind of joy and satisfaction they get in that medium, which is the hope. To be honest, that maybe they get that kind of satisfaction with that medium, but definitely not me. And the other part of your question is the future of miniature art. I would say uh, that the best kind of future for miniature art that I can hope for is the past of miniature art because it's so glorious and it is something uh, which is like uh, the standards are so excellent and so close, so perfect that the best thing that I can hope for the future of miniature art is to take any bit that you're capable of from the past of it.
Hmm. Beautiful, beautifully put it. Yeah, I think this is a good note to end. It's such a fascinating world that I would definitely want you to have again, where we talk more about more nuances about the subject, where I will hopefully be able to do better research and come up with like yeah, is it just endless? Given the folklore stories, given the porcupine thing that you said is just amazing. Cool. I think.
I try
Thanks.
to
Yeah.
do
You want
my
to add
best.
anything? Yeah. Yeah.
No, I was just like sort of seconding you on what you just said, that in the 1 or 2 days that we've discussed this for, I tried to pack as many beautiful, obscure stories from here and there that I could. And I was very aware in my head that I shouldn't take too long answering, because, बात
No.
लेगी तो बहुत दूर तक जाएगी is the situation that always happens to me. So I tried to do my best sticking to your questions. And I'm sure like it's a conversation that we can endlessly have, and it would be absolutely my pleasure to join you whenever.
Awesome. If people have to follow your work, you want to plug anything as a concluding thought, like your sort of you take workshops or you sort of like anything that you want to plug in the end.
I uh, I mostly live in my bubble, and I
Okay.
try to get myself out of it, and sort of collaborate and do new things, try new mediums with other people. That is something that I'm doing right now. But for now, the only place is Instagram. Like exactly like how you must have stumbled upon my work there. That's the only place where all my work is there for people to see, which is Jadugar by Srijan, and that's the
What's the
name
story
that
with Jadugar?
it's something that just happened while I graduated from my college. I graduated from design college, and I had studied fashion design, and I did a year of corporate work with uh, a big company, which paid me the kind of money that I thought was really important to start off with. And one day I just came back home, and I knew that I'm not going to do this job. And the only exhale that I had out of feeling the kind of frustration that I did that evening was I was painting a magician, and I wrote Jadugar on it. And that name just stuck around. And I never felt like I needed to change it in any manner, because with time, when the detail grew in my work, uh, people started enjoying that name also, that yeah, तूने तो जादू कर दिया है इस painting में. And it's just something that I think is something that will stick around with me for the rest of my life.
Awesome. I'm also going to add some links in the show notes for people to follow you and Instagram, Twitter. So thanks a lot, Srijan, for giving your time. It was just wonderful to have you on the show.
Thank you so much too. I absolutely enjoyed it, Kiran.
Okay, that's it. Thanks. And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.